Imagine living in a place where war isn't just history, it's a recurring nightmare that shapes everything. That's the story of Israel and its neighbors for over 70 years. From desperate fights for survival to calculated military operations, these conflicts didn't just redraw maps. They created refugees, toppled governments, and left scars that still bleed today. Let's dive into every major Israeli war and discover how each one led to the next. Picture this. The year is 1947. The Holocaust has just ended. Survivors are arriving in Palestine, desperate for safety. Meanwhile, Arabs who've lived there for generations watch nervously as their homeland gets carved up by foreigners at the UN. On November 29, 1947, the United Nations votes to split Palestine into two states, one Jewish, one Arab. The Jews say yes, the Arabs say absolutely not. And that's when the shooting starts. What began as neighbor fighting neighbor quickly exploded into something much bigger. Jewish communities found themselves surrounded, outnumbered, and fighting for their lives. The Haganah, their main defense force, had to protect scattered settlements, connected only by dangerous roads. Arab militias ambushed supply convoys. Jerusalem was cut off and starving. Then came May 14th, 1948. David Ben-Gurion declared Israel's independence. The very next day, 5 Arab armies invaded. Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, all determined to strangle this new nation at birth. But here's where it gets wild. Despite being outnumbered, the Israelis had some key advantages. They fought with the desperation of people who had nowhere else to go. Many were World War II veterans. They had better organization. And secretly, they'd been buying weapons from Czechoslovakia. The war saw brutal battles. At Latrun, Israeli forces tried again and again to break through to Jerusalem, losing hundreds in the scorching heat. In the south, they eventually surrounded the Egyptian army in what they called the Fallujah Pocket. Young commander Yigal Yadin coordinated operations, while Moshe Dayan, who lost an eye in combat, became a legend. On the Arab side, Jordan's Arab Legion proved the toughest. Led by a British officer named Glub Pasha, they held the old city of Jerusalem and the West Bank. But the Arab armies barely coordinated. Each had its own agenda. The human cost? Devastating. Israel lost 6,000 people. That's 1% of its entire population. Imagine America losing 3 million people in a war. Arab military deaths numbered around 7,000. But the real tragedy, 750,000 Palestinians fled or were forced from their homes. They thought they'd return after the Arab victory. They never did. The war ended with armistice agreements in 1949. Israel survived, but controlled 78% of Palestine.
This war created Israel, but also created the Palestinian refugee crisis. 2 peoples, 1 land, 0 solutions. The seeds of every future conflict were planted right here. 7 years later, tensions were boiling again. Egypt had a new leader, Gamal Abdel Nasser, charismatic, ambitious, determined to unite the Arab world against Israel. Palestinian Fedayeen launched deadly raids from Gaza, killing Israeli civilians. Egypt blocked Israeli ships from the Suez Canal and the Red Sea. Then Nasser did something that changed everything. In July 1956, he nationalized the Suez Canal. Britain and France freaked out. This was their economic lifeline to Asia. Secretly, they cooked up a plan with Israel. It sounded almost too crazy to believe. Here's how it worked. Israel would invade Egypt. Britain and France would then step in as peacekeepers to protect the canal. Everyone wins. Israel stops the raids, opens the waterways, weakens Nasser. Britain and France get their canal back. What could go wrong? On October 29, 1956, Israeli paratroopers dropped deep into Sinai, at the Mitla Pass. Within 100 hours, they conquered the entire peninsula. A young colonel named Ariel Sharon led his brigade through supposedly impassable terrain, outflanking Egyptian positions. Israeli forces raced to the canal and south to Sharm el-Sheikh. The Egyptians were caught completely off guard. Their army crumbled. But then, the plan fell apart spectacularly. See, nobody told the Americans or Soviets about this secret deal. President Eisenhower was furious. The Soviets threatened to nuke London and Paris. Yes, really, the two superpowers, normally enemies, united to stop this colonial adventure. Under massive pressure, everyone backed down. Israel gained a few things: UN peacekeepers in Gaza, free passage through the Red Sea. But they also learned a brutal truth. Without American support, military victory means nothing. And the real winner, Nasser, he lost the war, but won the politics. He became the hero who stood up to Western imperialism. The Suez Crisis marked the end of British and French power in the Middle East. From now on, it was America and Russia's game. Fast forward to spring 1967. Tensions were rising everywhere. Syria and Israel exchanged fire over water rights. Palestinian attacks increased. Then came a spark from Moscow. Soviet intelligence told Egypt that Israel was massing troops to invade Syria. It was completely false, but Nasser believed it. What happened next was like dominoes falling. Nasser moved troops into Sinai. He kicked out UN peacekeepers. Then, on May 22nd, he closed the Straits of Tiran to Israeli shipping, an act of war. Jordan and Syria joined Egypt in a defense pact. Arab leaders openly talked of destroying Israel. But Israel's generals had a plan, a desperate, brilliant gamble. June 5th, 7:45 a.m. Nearly the entire Israeli Air Force took off. Flying low to avoid radar, they struck 18 Egyptian airfields simultaneously. In just 3 hours, they destroyed 286 of Egypt's 420 combat aircraft. Most never left the ground. The war was essentially won in those 3 hours, but no one knew it yet. On the ground, Israeli armor thundered through Sinai. General Israel Tal smashed the north. Ariel Sharon executed a daring night assault at Abu Ajala. Within 4 days, Israeli tanks reached the Suez Canal. Meanwhile, Jordan made a fatal mistake. Despite Israeli warnings to stay out, King Hussein began shelling Jerusalem. Israel struck back. They seized the West Bank and East Jerusalem. When Israeli paratroopers reached the Western Wall, Judaism's holiest site, lost for 19 years, hardened soldiers wept. Syria held out until June 9th. Then, Israel turned north. In brutal uphill fighting, they captured the Golan Heights. The results? Staggering. In just 6 days, Israel tripled its territory. They captured Sinai, Gaza, the West Bank, and the Golan Heights. Arab losses: over 20,000 dead, 400 aircraft, hundreds of tanks. Israel lost 776 soldiers. But this stunning victory created a new problem. Now, Israel controlled over 1 million Palestinians. The occupation that began in 1967 continues to this day. Military triumph brought political disaster. The 6-day war proved Israel could win any battle, but could they win the peace? Most people don't even know about this war. It wasn't dramatic like the others. No sweeping invasions, no iconic images. Instead, it was a grinding, bloody stalemate from 1969 to 1970. Egypt couldn't accept losing Sinai, but President Nasser knew his army couldn't beat Israel in open battle. So, he chose a different strategy: bleed them slowly, make the occupation too costly to maintain. It began with artillery duels across the Suez Canal. Israel built the Bar Lev Line, a string of fortified positions along the canal's east bank. Egypt pounded these bunkers daily. At night, Egyptian commandos crossed the water to lay ambushes. Israel hit back with raids of their own. But then, things escalated. Israel used its new American Phantom jets to strike deep inside Egypt. They bombed military bases near Cairo. Civilians died. Nasser was desperate. In January 1970, he flew to Moscow, in secret, and said essentially, "Help or I fall." What did the war accomplish? Nothing, except death. Israel lost 367 soldiers, not much by World War standards, but devastating for a country so small. Egypt lost 5,000. Both sides were exhausted, but Egypt walked away with something valuable: knowledge. They had studied Israeli tactics, learned where the weak points were, and with Soviet help, they rebuilt their army from the ground up. The War of Attrition didn't redraw borders, but it did redraw strategy. It proved a painful truth: Israel could win battles, but it couldn't win peace. Military superiority had limits. October 6, 1973, Yom Kippur, the holiest day in Judaism. Israelis were fasting, praying, the streets were silent. At 2 p.m., air raid sirens shattered the stillness. Egypt and Syria attacked simultaneously, but this wasn't 1967. This time, the Arabs had learned. In the south, Egyptian troops crossed the Suez Canal in rubber boats. They used high-pressure water cannons to blast through Israel's sand barriers. Bridges unfolded like magic. Within hours, 100,000 Egyptian soldiers were across. Israeli tanks rushed to counterattack and ran into a nightmare. Egyptian infantry now carried Soviet anti-tank missiles. Tiny teams taking out million-dollar tanks from a mile away. Israel's armor advantage vanished. In Sinai, Israel was losing. Up north, it was even worse. Syria sent 1,400 tanks into the Golan Heights. Israel had 180. Syrian tanks broke through, racing toward the Sea of Galilee. If they reached it, Tel Aviv could fall within hours. Defense Minister Moshe Dayan, a hero of past wars, panicked. He spoke of the destruction of the Third Temple. Israel prepared its nuclear weapons. Yes, it got that bad. But then, incredible stories of heroism. On the Golan, Lieutenant Colonel Avigdor Kahalani had 7 tanks. He faced 150. For 20 straight hours, he held a crucial crossroads. His tank caught fire. His uniform burned. He kept fighting. They called it the Valley of Tears. Hundreds of Syrian tanks stopped just short of victory. In the Sinai, Israel found a gap between 2 Egyptian armies. Ariel Sharon wanted to exploit it. Cross the canal, attack from behind. The generals thought he was insane, but desperation breeds audacity. 2,656 Israelis were dead. The national trauma was immense. The invincible army almost wasn't. But something unexpected emerged. Egypt's President Sadat had crossed the canal. He restored Arab honor and earned the political capital to pursue peace. The Yom Kippur War's near disaster led to Camp David. Sometimes you have to almost lose everything to realize what truly matters. Lebanon in the 1970s was chaos, civil war, foreign armies, militias everywhere. The PLO, kicked out of Jordan, had built a mini-state in southern Lebanon. They launched raids into Israel. Rockets rained on northern towns. Defense Minister Ariel Sharon had big plans. Not just stop the attacks, transform the Middle East. Install a Christian ally as Lebanon's president. Kick out the Syrians. Destroy the PLO. What could go wrong? Everything. June 6, 1982. Israel invades. The official goal? Advance 40 kilometers to create a buffer zone. But Sharon had told different plans to different people. The army kept going and going. Within days, Israeli forces surrounded Beirut. The Israeli Air Force shredded Syrian air defenses, shooting down 86 Syrian jets without losing one. Technology made it look easy, too easy. Then came the siege of Beirut. 9 weeks of bombardment, civilians trapped, PLO fighters hiding among them. TV screens around the world showed dead children, and the world watched in horror. Israel was winning militarily and losing everything else. In August, the PLO evacuated. Victory? Maybe. Then Israel's Christian allies were elected. Their leader, Bashir Gemayel, was assassinated. His followers wanted revenge. What happened next still haunts Israel. Israeli forces allowed Christian militiamen into the Palestinian refugee camps of Sabra and Shatila. For 3 days, they massacred civilians. Maybe 800, maybe 3,000. Israeli soldiers stood nearby and did nothing. The scandal rocked Israel. Massive protests. The first time Israelis said as one, "Not in our name." Sharon resigned. Prime Minister Menachem Begin, devastated, left politics forever. Worse still, the invasion created a new enemy. Lebanese Shia, initially relieved the PLO was gone, turned against Israel. From the anger, a new group emerged. Hezbollah, backed by Iran, trained for guerrilla warfare, absolutely dedicated to expelling Israel. Israel withdrew to a security zone in 1985, but for 15 more years, soldiers died in ambushes. For 20 years, since 1967, Palestinians had lived under occupation. A whole generation grew up seeing Israeli soldiers daily. Checkpoints, permits, humiliation. They'd had enough. But here's what made the Intifada special. It wasn't about armies, it was popular resistance. Everyone participated. Kids threw stones, women organized boycotts, workers went on strike. Entire communities refused to pay taxes. The image became iconic. Teenagers with slingshots, facing Israeli tanks. David versus Goliath reversed. The optics were terrible for Israel. Israel tried everything. Live ammunition, kids kept coming. Rubber bullets, they kept coming. Mass arrests, over 120,000 Palestinians detained. Defense Minister Yitzhak Rabin allegedly told soldiers to break their bones. Universities closed, curfews imposed, homes demolished. Nothing worked. You can't defeat an idea with force. During this time, Hamas emerged, mixing nationalism with Islam. The uprising wasn't just about politics anymore. It became about identity, faith, dignity. And both sides hardened. By 1993, everyone was exhausted. 1,162 Palestinians were dead, 241 children, 160 Israelis killed, the economy in ruins. Israel realized, you can't occupy a people forever. Palestinians realized, stones don't defeat armies. But the Intifada changed everything. It led to Oslo, Rabin and Arafat shaking hands. For a moment, hope, the cycle might break. It didn't. But the First Intifada proved something fundamental. Palestinians wouldn't disappear. They were a nation, demanding recognition. And the conflict could only end one way, not through force, but negotiation. Remember that hope from Oslo? By 2000 it was dead. 7 years of negotiations had produced more settlements, more restrictions. Palestinians felt betrayed. Israelis felt terrorized. The Camp David summit failed. Everything was a powder keg. The spark? September 28, 2000. Ariel Sharon visited the Temple Mount with 1,000 police. Palestinians saw it as provocation. Riots exploded. But this time was different. This wasn't stones. This was war. Suicide bombers struck everywhere. Buses, cafes, hotels, the Dolphinarium disco, 21 teenagers dead. Sbarro Pizzeria, 15 dead, including children. Park Hotel Passover massacre, 30 elderly killed during a holiday meal. Israelis were terrified to leave home. Israel responded with overwhelming force. Tanks returned to Palestinian cities. Apache helicopters fired missiles into apartment buildings. They besieged Arafat in his compound, built a massive wall through the West Bank. The Battle of Jenin showed how brutal it became. Israeli forces entered the refugee camp. Israel assassinated leaders with missile strikes. Each funeral created more fighters. Each bombing created more hardliners. By 2005, everyone was broken. Over 1,000 Israelis dead, mostly civilians. 3,000 Palestinians killed. Thousands maimed. Children traumatized. Economies destroyed. Trust obliterated. The Second Intifada didn't end with agreement. It ended with exhaustion. Israel built its wall and disengaged from Gaza. Palestinians were divided and defeated. Both societies moved toward extremes. The peace process was dead. Hope was dead. Only walls and weapons remained. Remember Hezbollah, that group born from Israel's 1982 invasion? By 2006, they'd become a real army. 15,000 rockets aimed at Israel. Bunkers and tunnels across southern Lebanon. Iran provided weapons and training. Israel watched nervously. Then came July 12th. Hezbollah crossed the border, killed 3 soldiers, kidnapped 2. They wanted prisoner exchanges. They got war. Israel's new leaders, Prime Minister Ehud Olmert, Defense Minister Amir Peretz, had little military experience. They believed air power could win. For 34 days, Israeli jets pounded Lebanon. Bridges, power plants, airports, all destroyed. But Hezbollah kept firing rockets. 4,000 rockets hit northern Israel. 1 million Israelis fled or lived in shelters. Haifa burned. Then Hezbollah did something shocking. They hit an Israeli warship with a missile. Nobody expected that. When ground forces finally entered Lebanon, they met surprises. Hezbollah fought like a real army. Anti-tank missiles destroyed Israel's best tanks. Bunkers survived massive bombing. Elite Israeli units walked into ambushes. The world watched Lebanon burn on TV. Over 1,100 Lebanese civilians died. Entire neighborhoods were flattened. A quarter of Lebanon's population fled. International pressure mounted. Both sides claimed victory, but everyone knew the truth. Israel, the regional superpower, couldn't defeat a guerrilla army. Hezbollah survived, but admitted they wouldn't have started the war if they'd known the response. UN Resolution 1701 created an uneasy peace. The war exposed uncomfortable truths. Technology couldn't replace strategy. Air power had limits. Non-state actors could challenge nation-states, and Hezbollah rebuilt stronger. 150,000 rockets by 2023. The next round would be worse. Everyone knew it. After Israel left Gaza in 2005, Palestinians had a chance. Instead,
Hamas and Fatah fought a civil war. Hamas won, killed Fatah members, took control. Israel and Egypt imposed a blockade. The Strip became an open-air prison. What followed was a depressing pattern. Rockets from Gaza, Israeli airstrikes, ground invasion, ceasefire, rebuild, repeat. Each round had a name, like a grim recurring episode. Operation Cast Lead, 2008 to 2009, started it. Hamas rockets met massive Israeli force. White phosphorus over populated areas. UN schools hit.
Then came Operation Pillar of Defense in 2012. It introduced Iron Dome, Israel's miracle defense system. Rockets were intercepted mid-air, spectacular to watch. But rockets still reached Tel Aviv for the first time since 1991. Another round, another stalemate. Operation Protective Edge in 2014 was the worst. It began with kidnapped teenagers, revenge killings, escalation. Hamas showed new tricks, tunnels into Israel, naval commandos, longer-range rockets. Israel found 32 attack tunnels. The fighting lasted 50 days. The images were horrific. Entire Gaza neighborhoods reduced to rubble. 2,100 Palestinians dead, 72 Israelis killed, the most since Lebanon. Many were children. Both sides hardened further. Between the big operations came smaller ones, Guardian of the Walls, Breaking Dawn, Black Belt. Same script, different year. Egypt mediates, both declare victory. Nothing resolved. The Gaza wars proved something undeniable. Military force can't solve political problems. Each round, Israel's weapons got smarter. Precision strikes, tunnel detection, Iron Dome. Each round, Gaza got more desperate. Dense, poor, traumatized. No victory, no peace. Just managed conflict. Over 4,000 Palestinians dead since 2008. Around 100 Israelis. Children grow up knowing only war. PTSD everywhere. The cycle continues because nobody has answers. How do you make peace with those who want you destroyed? How do you resist when resistance brings destruction? Gaza remains a wound that won't heal. For decades, Israel and Iran fought in the shadows, cyber attacks, assassinations, proxy wars. But in June 2025, the shadow war exploded into direct conflict. The fuse had been burning for years. Iran's nuclear program kept advancing, despite sanctions. By early 2025, they were weeks from a bomb. Israel watched its nightmare scenario unfold. Meanwhile, Iranian proxies, Hezbollah, Hamas, Houthis in Yemen, coordinated attacks like never before. Israel was being surrounded. On June 13, Israel said, "Enough." Operation Rising Lion targeted Iran's Natanz nuclear facility and military commanders. Within hours, IRGC commander Hossein Salami was dead. Top nuclear scientists were killed in coordinated strikes across Tehran. Mossad operatives on the ground had disabled air defenses. allowing Israeli jets to strike freely. Iran's response came fast. Operation True Promise 3 launched over 100 drones and missiles. This wasn't a symbolic warning. Iran kept firing back 550 ballistic missiles, 1,000 drones. The Weizmann Institute, a world-renowned research center, was destroyed. But both sides pulled punches. They wanted to hurt, not annihilate. Even in war, they feared what total war might bring. Then came the game changer. June 22nd. President Trump ordered B-2 bombers to strike Iran's underground nuclear sites. Fordo, Natanz, Isfahan, all hit with 30,000-pound bunker busters. Trump declared them totally obliterated. Iran responded instantly, firing missiles at the US base in Qatar, calling it Operation Annunciation of Victory. The war was spreading. Oil prices spiked. Shipping insurance collapsed. The world economy shuddered. Both superpowers realized this had to stop. By June 23rd, exhaustion set in. Israel was running low on interceptors. Iran's missile stockpiles were depleting. Trump announced a ceasefire. Both sides accepted. Initial violations followed, but Trump personally intervened with Netanyahu. By June 24th, the ceasefire held. The numbers tell the story. Iran reported 935 dead. Human rights groups said over 1,100. Israel lost 29 people, with 3,238 injured. Thousands displaced. Infrastructure crippled. But the real damage was strategic. Iran's nuclear sites were damaged, but not eliminated. Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi admitted they were seriously and heavily damaged, but vowed reconstruction. Israel proved it could strike anywhere, but not prevent retaliation. The Pentagon assessed Iran's nuclear program was set back 1 to 2 years. Significant but not permanent. So, who won? Both claimed victory. Israel said it removed the nuclear threat. Iran said it survived, and proved it could hurt Israel. The taboo against direct warfare was broken. Both sides learned they could inflict damage, but neither could win decisively. The 2025 war lasted just 12 days. But it changed everything. It proved military strikes can't erase knowledge. It showed both nations could absorb punishment and keep fighting. Most dangerously, it established a new precedent. Open conflict is now possible, and in the Middle East, where each war plants seeds for the next. This may be the most dangerous outcome of all. From desperate survival in 1948 to high-tech warfare in 2025, these conflicts tell a tragic story. Each war solved immediate threats, but created future problems. Each victory brought new enemies. Each peace process ended in more violence. The human cost keeps mounting. Hundreds of thousands dead, millions displaced, entire generations traumatized.